What is worth seeing in Georgia? Georgia sits at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Yes, it's right below Russia, but it's extremely safe, beautiful, and is also the birthplace of wine. We visited 3 areas of Georgia: Tbilisi, Batumi, and the mountainous Svaneti region. Tbilisi is the capital, one of the oldest capitals in Europe, and has 8,000 years of history making wine. I love the streets here. They looked Arabic and European, almost like a Disney film set. Freedom Square is the center of Tbilisi and the start of Rustaveli Avenue, the central road that runs through the city. This is Eva, a Russian I met in the SIM card shop, who was also traveling here, and we decided to explore together. I recommend going up the cable car. You get this amazing panoramic view of the old town, and at the top there sits the Mother of Georgia statue and Narikala Fort. Be aware of the very slippery, loose rocks on this fort. I had terrible footwear and struggled quite a bit to get up there. However, once you're up there, the view is pretty awesome. Now, further down into the city is the Bridge of Peace, and this connects Old Town to Rike Park. And on that side, you can find where the cable car starts and the hot air balloon. Fabrika is a cultural space and center. It has cool artwork and is a great place to stay. If you're young or creative, they have a big hostel there, and it's a perfect place to meet people. One of the first things you'll notice in Tbilisi when you get there is the Metekhi St. Virgin Church, and that sits opposite the old town across the river, and is one of the oldest in the city. However, one of the churches you shouldn't miss is the Holy Trinity Cathedral, which is one of the most magnificent churches in the city. We also visited Mtatsminda Park. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but it's a dated theme park with some basic rides from the Soviet times and this roller coaster which was quite creaky and a bit scary. You also get a decent view of the city. In the old town there's also a market called Meidan Bazaar, and they sell some basic souvenirs. You can get cha-cha, which is the clear traditional spirit of Georgia, and you can get different flavors, and it's similar to kind of like vodka. Now, before I talk about the amazing Georgian food that we tried, we also did a day trip that I really recommend along the Georgian military highway. Rob and I hired a private driver from GoTrip for the day to take us up to Kazbegi, home of the Gergeti Trinity Church. And the first stop on this trip was to Jvari Monastery, which was stunning and overlooked Mestia, a former royal capital of Georgia. The second stop was to Zhinvali Reservoir, which had amazing scenic landscapes. Eventually you will hit Anunuri Fortress and the scene of many historic battles. It dates back to the 13th century and it's incredible to see it still standing. Now it's probably lunchtime and you will hit Pasanauri. We went to restaurant Pasanauri for their King Kali. Now this is one of those foods that you cannot miss. It is a Georgian traditional dumpling filled with meat and spices, and they are massive. The next stop on this trip is the Russia-Georgia Friendship Monument, an impressive tile work built in the 1980s, depicting scenes of Georgian and Russian history and overlooking the Devil's Valley. And then, soon after, you will hit Jvari Pass, a high mountain road going through several valleys with incredible views. Kazbegi is the final stop, and where you can find Gergeti Trinity Church. Now this church is a 2-hour hike each way, or you can get a 15-minute drive, which is an additional 150 lari, to hire a 4x4 car to take you up there. I really recommend going up to that church. There's incredible 360-degree views in a stunning location. Now just before you reach the Russian border, there is another stop-off point called the Dariali Monastery, which isn't a must, but I found this place peaceful and super enchanting. This is definitely Georgia's most scenic road, so I highly recommend it. Now I want to talk to you about the other key city that you can't miss in Georgia that I like even more than Tbilisi. Batumi is a port and coastal city by the Black Sea and one of my favourite places when I visited. There's Batumi Boulevard, which has a seaside promenade, a beach, and nice beach bars. You can hire a scooter, practice your boxing, or if you're feeling lucky, hit up one of the casinos. Europe Square is the centre of Batumi, and has a mix of modern and ancient architecture. It has an array of restaurants and even a market in the evening. One of the most impressive Soviet structures still standing is the Batumi Octopus, a mosaic that serves as a cafe along the promenade. I also recommend going up the cable car to get a great view of the city. A return ticket costs 30 lari, which is about £9, and there's also a restaurant up there if you're feeling peckish. The real gem of this country though is the Svaneti region, in the remote northwestern part of the country. Mestia is in the heart of the Caucasus Mountains, with beautiful valleys, snowy mountaintops, and these iconic medieval tower houses called koshki. It's a 5-hour minivan from Tbilisi, and not the most pleasant journey, but once you get there, it's totally worth it. We stayed at this guest house called Bapsha Guesthouse, which had great hospitality, and this restaurant we ate at called Blue Mountains, which had this amazing view. However, the reason we came here was to do a 4-day hike to Ushguli, one of the highest settlements in Europe. And it didn't begin well.
What are you doing, mate? Why are you slipping on private property?
Come on. Security guard, he just said no. I knew this was gonna happen.
It seemed like the British weather had followed us here. Eventually though, things cleared up and we reached this insane valley. However, someone was getting a bit fed up.
Hey, just stop with the videoing. It's weird.
A few hours later, we reached Zhabeshi, the location of our guest house for the night. This was a great place to stay, and the hospitality and food were both fantastic. The second day began with a steep uphill climb, but the nature was terrible for my hay fever. We got to this nice scenic point though to take a break.
We're back on the YouTubing now, are we? Now that no more exercise is required, we're back on. Oh, hi guys! Look, we're drinking.
Eventually, we got to Adishi, the halfway point of our trip, and at an even more basic guest house. But it was about to get a lot harder.
These are my goat friends, Casper and John. So it's day 3 of our hike. Today is Adishi to Iprari, and we're just leaving Adishi now on a 7-hour marathon journey up a 1,000 meter elevation and 19 kilometers of walking.
It started off with a gentle hike through the valley with a few furry friends, before we reached this raging river. And this was the first problem.
We're at the river crossing and you have to get a horse over. Over here you can see the horses because the water can go up to your waist apparently.
After considering our options, we went for the safe passage across with the horses. Bear in mind though that this isn't an option if you get there after midday. Now the really tough part was this steep incline up this huge mountain. We passed this beautiful glacier on the way, and once we reached the top, it was one of the best peaks I'd ever seen in my life. Being able to see the river, the valley and the mountains was spectacular.
Look at that. Look at that, guys. If I had my drone here, this would be absolutely insane.
Now the downhill to the next village took another 3 hours of pain. It was the middle of August and we were burning. We arrived at Guesthouse Lalkhori and we were greeted by this good boy.
The last day of our hike. Very short one today, 3 hours. Lots of empty fields today, guys. And lots of insects as per usual.
After walking through dozens of fields and being attacked by thousands of flies, we were almost there.
What have you got to say after this long hike?
That's enough recording. Fucking hell.
And there it was, Ushguli. I was so exhausted, I could only feel relief, but the view definitely didn't disappoint. We'd booked Hotel Mate, which was a great little hotel on top of a hill, and it was my favourite place that I stayed at on this hike, and the beds were much more comfortable. I really recommend doing this hike though in September or October when it's much cooler and more colourful with the leaves of autumn. Now the part that you've been waiting for, the food. Of course, I mentioned kinkali, these massive dumplings filled with meat and soup. Khachapuri is this boat-shaped bread filled with cheese and baked with an egg on top. Beef karcho is this beef tomato soup with spices. And kubdari, this is a bread filled with meat. So yeah, you can see that the food here is quite carby, and quite meaty, so if you're not into that, you might struggle a bit. Shvistari is this cornbread filled with cheese, and a notable dessert is church kala. It's this funny looking candy that kind of looks like a sausage, but it's actually condensed fruit juice and nuts, and it tastes great. And of course, since this is the home of wine, I can't not mention the wine tasting. Georgian wine is less bitter than European wine, and I think it actually tastes better. So that was some of the most incredible places we visited in Georgia, but there are so many more, such as Kakheti, the wine region, Gori, the birthplace of Stalin, and Kutaisi, one of the oldest cities in the world. I highly recommend you visit this beautiful country. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, but for now, Nakvam Dis.